Yes po, sir. Kita po, sir.
Yes,
All right, thank
sir.
you. So we'll proceed with our discussion on the foundations of assessment, as well as how do we assess in an e-learning development, and also your guide for module development. No? But before we proceed with the general topic, let us be reminded with the idea that it is impossible to separate assessment from curriculum, because the main reason why we are implementing the curriculum is to check whether it is effective in terms of its implementation and efficient in terms of its preparation. That's why, as what I've discussed yesterday, the three main components of the educative system would be the idea, or the learning plans, or the instructional plans would be the idea of curriculum outcomes, or the curriculum itself, the program of instruction, as well as the teaching and learning activities, and in order for us to validate how it is being effective and efficient through what we call the assessment, or the evaluative measures that we will be conducting. Therefore, based on your assessment strategy, it will come up with an evidence in a view, or in a principle of a support system that will validate the effectiveness of the curriculum. How can we check the evidence? So it's being based from the tangible and the intangible outcomes of your student. It may be an output wherein you require your student to submit something in the form of a project, pass an exam, come up with an exhibit, or formulate a research output. Then it will validate the competencies cited on the curriculum. Mean to say, every activity, whether it is in the form of a formative assessment or summative assessment, it will help us identify if we are really attaining the appropriate competencies or skills identified on our curriculum outcome. So which is more important, or which is viable? Is it the output or the outcome? So the idea of output is that output can be considered as one of the indicators of the outcome, because we say that output, these are the general tangible results, no? Tangible results of our student when we ask them to accomplish something in a given lesson. Whether it is in the form of an examination that's considered to be an output, it can produce what we call academic progress or academic achievement. Aside from that, all of this output can be indicators for a good outcome, wherein, if you will recall the idea of outcomes-based education, we heavily rely on the skill. Outcomes-based education heavily rely on the skill and competencies set by the program that the student must accomplish and must fully engage. For example, kung ang course ng bata ay Bachelor in Secondary Education, ang outcome ng program na kanyang tinake ay pagka-graduate niya ng edu, kailangan marunong siya gumawa ng exam, marunong siya magturo, alam niya ang different instructional strategies and approaches and teaching, alam niya kung paano gumawa ng lesson plan, he knows how to handle classroom discipline and class and student behavior. Every aspect of education or the field of education must be fully engaged. Another example, kapag ang bata ay nakagraduate ng real estate management, what are the expected skills and competencies for a graduate of a real estate management or becoming a real estate manager? So that's what we call the outcome. It's more on long term. Once the student graduated in a program or in a course, he or she should be able to practice what he had learned in his academic baccalaureate preparation. And later on, it will cause an impact. The quality of our graduates will depend on the quality of instruction that we implemented during the time that we are handling them. And that will connote the idea of impact. That's very important, because it labels and it puts the school at the pedestal. Meaning to say, the quality of our graduates can also be an indicator of the quality of the school and the quality of the institution. Now, let's talk about the different assessment types. Whenever you give your exams or give your performance indicators or means for verifying their skills or competencies, it can be associated with different assessment tasks. First one is a summative assessment. Usually, summative assessment, as we all know, it is being given at the end of the learning unit or academic period. Meaning to say, best example would be the major examination, chapter test. Aside from that, the final requirements, for example, research output, oral defenses, term papers, case study analysis, considered to be delivered right after the instruction has been implemented. It can be delivered anytime, in any place, or at any space. In an online learning environment, we can also do that. Okay. Aside from that, we have the formative assessment. It is being done before and during the instruction. So, for example, if you're doing recitations, short quizzes, or observations to your student, it can be done through what we call in a form of a formative assessment. So usually, pag ba sa online learning, ano ba ang mas marami? Ang formative assessment ba o ang summative assessment? Again, it depends on the context of your subject matter. Ibig sabihin, hindi man kailangan na in a week, halimbawa in a week of instruction, 3 beses ka magka-formative assessment. You need to estimate also, and you need to rethink and reflect kung nagbabalance ba or nagja-jive ba yung amount ng topic na diniscuss mo with the number of assessment tasks that you be able to incorporate on your lesson. Okay. Now let's talk about the different types of the non-conventional assessment. And this is very important in implementing an e-learning course or on an online learning course. First one is the performance-based assessment. This is the main thrust of the outcomes-based education, wherein we heavily rely on the outputs and the outcomes of students based on a performance. Meaning to say, ang idea kasi ni William Spady who is the father of the outcomes-based education, and I learned the outcomes-based education from some of his talks here in the Philippines, and he always reiterating that outcomes-based is not merely focusing on exams and grades, but it focuses on the outcomes. Meaning to say, the main indicator of outcomes-based education is the quality of our graduate. Meaning to say, based on the standards or the skills set by the program or set by the institution, how will the student be able to accomplish those skills in a form of an authentic way of learning? Like for example, performance-based. Okay? Halimbawa, kung ang exam ay kung ang program ay engineering and it requires heavily on the subject matter discipline kasi may board examination siya. So, the essential skills or the competencies required by the program or the discipline must be incorporated in the way we teach the subject matter. Kasi, halimbawa, kung heavily relied on the pure content or pure concept or ideas. So, doon dapat nag-focus ang ating disciplinal teaching. For example, in education, since the licensure exam focuses on critical thinking and analysis, it's not that important to give our student in the education program the idea of providing enumerations. Enumeration, for example, 1 to 50 enumeration items. They're trying to memorize everything, but it's not merely the component of the licensure exam. It focuses on the multiple choice using the principles of critical thinking and creativity or problem-solving skills. So, kaya yung manner of assessment can also be aligned with the manner on how the licensure exams are being administered. For example, I suggest na kapag ang licensure exam ay purely multiple choice, most of our major exams must be in multiple choice, maintaining or predicting the standards of a licensure examination. And that can be also done through what we call a performance-based assessment. Like in PE, PE doesn't heavily rely on theories, but it heavily focuses on performances. Like for example, dances, sports, acquisition of skills, performances. Practice-based assessment in sciences and mathematics, like problem-solving exercises, matters, even demonstrations. Okay? Halimbawa, nag-online ka at magpapakunda ka ng laboratory experiment. Hindi naman pwede pumunta ang bata sa school para mag-conduct ng laboratory. So you need to think of the alternatives. How will the student be able still to demonstrate the skills cited on the laboratory work? Halimbawa, si teacher, ikaw mag-online class ka, mag-record ka ng video mo na nagde-demonstrate ka ng mga experiments. So that's possible. That can be also your instructional materials later on sa mga susunod pa mga klase. And that can promote also, kung hindi man nakikita o na-experience ng bata yung experiment, at least makita niya na ikaw mismo as teacher, din na-demonstrate mo kung paano ginagawa yung mga experiment. Project-based assessment is the usual thing that we do, wherein we let our student to accomplish something in the form of a paper output, software output, a performance-based. So project performance-based assessment is also similar with the project-based assessment. It's just that it's highly dependent on the output itself, not merely on the performance. That's why it's more on project-based or the output-based assessment. Which is we consider also the idea of process and product, no, which ano ba talaga ang nagmamatter sa atin, the process on the way how the output is being administered or the final product. But actually in assessment, it should always address both of the concerns. That's why we have certain means for monitoring the output of our student. And yeah, monitoring is very important. For example, when we ask them to, in the usual face-to-face, no, kapag ang output ng teacher ay magko-conduct ng play ang mga bata, 3 linggo nag-practice yung mga bata. So, may mga ibang teacher 3 linggo hindi rin umaattend ng klase nila kasi nag-practice yung mga bata. So, it's a no-no. As much as possible, we need to monitor what they're doing and their progress in the development of their output. Another one is portfolio. Portfolio is just merely an evidence or collection of all of the outputs of a student that can be organized by them. For example, in a form 1 exhibit, they can conduct a portfolio-based assessment or even journals, no, in their OJT or practicum immersion program or courses. A collection of all of the evidences, the best outputs. Halimbawa sa art classes natin, sa basic education, MAPE, if you will be asking your student to perform art activities or art sessions, lahat ng mga ginagawa nila mga artworks, pwede po natin i-compile yun in a form of a portfolio. And at the end, before the end of the school year, magkakaroon tayo ng isang mini gallery or exhibit ng lahat ng outputs na ginagawa nila. The same thing also in computer sciences, the development of software, the software output based on the research or the capstone projects of IT. So pwede po natin siyang exhibit. That's possible actually. Now let's talk about authentic learning and assessment. One of the integral parts of e-learning would be this one. Why is it important, and what does this implies in the idea of assessment in education? So remember that authentic learning is the idea of purpose, meaning to say, we ask our student to accomplish something because the activity that we want them to accomplish is something that is meaningful. Meaning to say, there's always an essence or importance or relevance on the quality of output that we ask them to submit. Example in TLE or home economics. We ask them to cook, we ask them to stage, no? We ask them to, naalala ko nung ako'y elementary, pinapagawa kami ng abaniko, pinapagawa kami ng apron, pinapag-sulsik kami ng shorts. Tama ba ako doon? Minsan nga may cross-stitch pa nga kasama siya. And I'm always wondering, what's the purpose of this? Ba't ba namin siya ginagawa? Then later on, nung ako'y nag-high school na and nag-college, doon ko naintindihan na kapag nasira pala ang aking short, ay pwede ko siyang tayin kasi yung teacher ko ng TLE, nung ako'y grade 5, ay tinuruan kami kung paano magtahi. Meaning to say, there's always a purpose, no? Why we want our student to accomplish those things that matters. Kasi mapapaisip pa mga bata minsan, dami-daming problem solving ng trigonometry at ng algebra, pero saan ko ba siya magagamit? Ano bang pinaka-purpose niya? There's always a purpose or a prerequisite importance. That's what they call prerequisite importance. In order for them to go to the higher level of mathematics, like